Episode 15, Queen Soma, the woman who forged an empire. History is often written by kings, generals, and sages, men. But deep within the founding histories and legends of Southeast Asia shines the figure of a woman, one who not only ruled, but was considered the mother of an entire people, the woman who forged an empire. Her name was Soma. Who was she? A real queen of flesh and blood, or a Naga Serpent Goddess who walked out of a myth? The answer lies at the intersection of both. Soma is one of the most important and mysterious figures in the region's early history, a symbol of indigenous power, of female strength, and the origin point of one of the greatest civilizations, Funan. Welcome back to the History of Southeast Asia series. In episode 15, we will search for the image of Queen Soma, the woman who stood at the dawn of Khmer history. Part 1. The World Before Soma, Echoes of a Matriarchal System. To understand the existence of a powerful queen like Soma, we must first take a step back and look at the world she lived in. This was a Southeast Asia not yet deeply influenced by the patriarchal models of China and India. Archaeological and anthropological evidence paints a very different social picture. One of the most prominent features of indigenous Southeast Asian cultures in their early stages was the high status of women. While in many other civilizations women were confined to domestic roles, here they actively participated in economic life, from agriculture and weaving to trade. More importantly, many communities are believed to have been organized along matrilineal systems, meaning that lineage and property were passed down through the mother's line. The power of women was not limited to the family. In native animist beliefs, the most powerful deities were often goddesses associated with the earth, the rivers, and fertility, like the rice goddess. Shamans, those who could communicate with the spirit world, were also often women. In such a social context, the appearance of a female chieftain or a queen was not an impossible fantasy, but a natural development. They were individuals who held both secular and spiritual power, the embodiment of the Earth Mother Goddess. Therefore, when Chinese chronicles record a queen ruling Funan, it is not a strange detail, but a precious echo of a long-standing social structure, a world where the power of women was recognized and revered. Part 2. The Fateful Encounter, the Myth of Kaundinya and Soma. The only and most valuable written source that tells of Soma comes from the account of the 3rd century Chinese envoy, Kong Tai. In his records, he called her by the name Liu-yeh, meaning willow leaf. Kong Tai describes Liu-yeh as a queen ruling the land of Funan. Notably, she was not just a symbolic queen, but also a military leader. When the boat of a foreigner named Kaundinya, Huntien, reached her shores, it was Liu-yeh herself who led her fleet out to plunder it. This image reveals a woman holding real power, both political and military, ready to defend her territory from intruders. The ensuing confrontation became a founding legend. Kaundinya, armed with a divine bow, fired a single arrow that pierced the queen's boat, forcing her to submit. Afterward, Kaundinya married her. This union gave birth to the first dynasty of Funan. Although the story ends with her becoming the wife of a foreign king, its beginning is incredibly important. It confirms that before the influx of Indian culture and patriarchal models, there existed a society where a woman could rise to the highest position of power. The figure of Queen Liu-yeh, Soma, is not a product of Indian thought, but a reflection of the indigenous social structure of Southeast Asia. Part 3. Decoding the Legend, Soma, the Naga Princess and the Divine Contract. Why does the story of Soma have such an enduring power and importance? Because she was not just a queen. In the consciousness of the Funanese people and their successors, she was the incarnation of the Naga Serpent Goddess. In the cosmology of many Southeast Asian peoples, the Naga is a supreme mythical being. Nagas are not demons, but deities who control the waters, the land, and fertility. They are the symbols of natural forces, of the homeland, of indigenous roots. A Naga princess, therefore, is the embodiment of the land itself, its true master. The marriage between Kaundinya, a foreign Brahmin, representing civilization, knowledge, and order from India, and Soma, the Naga queen, representing native, terrestrial power, is thus a politicized and sanctified social contract. It carries deep meanings. The legitimation of the dynasty, the new dynasty was not a foreign occupying force, but the result of a harmonious union between an external element and native roots. Later kings could pride themselves on being descendants of both a wise Brahmin and the sacred Naga goddess, the master of the land. The transfer of power. The story also reflects a social transition. Power gradually shifted from a possibly matrilineal system, headed by a queen, to a patrilineal system, where the king holds power, but the foundational and sacred role of the female element, symbolized by Soma, was still recognized and venerated. The Soma Kaundinya myth is not unique. It is part of a broader motif that appears in the founding myths of Kampa and the Pallava dynasty in South India. But it was in Funan, and later Angkor, that this myth was elevated to a national doctrine. Part 4. The New Dynasty in Funanese Society. After the fateful marriage, a new dynasty was established. So what did Funanese society look like under this dynasty? Based on Kong Thai's records and archaeological evidence, we can sketch a few features. The new dynasty seems to have brought great changes. The story of Kaundinya teaching Soma to wear clothes and tie her hair, though simple, is symbolic of the introduction of new cultural customs and norms from India. The ruling class began to use Sanskrit and adopt the political and religious concepts of Hinduism. However, the indigenous social structure did not disappear. On the contrary, it blended with the new elements. The veneration of Soma as a founding ancestress shows that the maternal line still played a crucial role in determining legitimacy. The power of Funanese kings seems to have been built on both foundations: divine authority in the Indian style and the recognition of local chieftains and communities. Funanese society was a prosperous one based on trade, as the treasures of OCEO have shown. But at the same time, it was a wet rice agricultural society. The harmony between these two elements is perhaps also reflected in the founding myth. Kaundinya, who came from the sea, trade, united with Soma, the master of the land, agriculture. It was this combination that created the strength and wealth of Funan. Part 5. The Immortal Ancestress, Soma's Enduring Legacy in Angkor. The legacy of Queen Soma did not end with the fall of Funan. On the contrary, it became even grander and more immortal when it was inherited and developed to a new level by the Khmer Empire of Angkor. The great Khmer kings, from Jayavarman II to Suryavarman II, all considered themselves the legitimate descendants of the sacred marriage between Kaundinya and Soma. Soma was no longer just the queen of Funan. She became the divine ancestral mother of the entire Khmer people. She was the source of the royal lineage, the symbol of the land of Cambodia. The Naga blood that flowed in the king's veins was the very proof of his legitimate right to rule. This belief was not just a story. It was institutionalized into one of the most important and mysterious court rituals of Angkor. The Chinese diplomat Zhou Daguan, who visited Angkor at the end of the 13th century, in 1296, recorded an astonishing detail. He recounted the belief that a nine-headed serpent goddess, the embodiment of Soma, resided in the golden tower atop the royal palace. Every night, the king had to ascend the tower and unite with the goddess. If the goddess did not appear one night, it was an omen that the king's death was near. If the king failed to ascend the tower, it was a sign that disaster would befall the kingdom. This ritual shows that, more than 1,000 years after the time of Funan, the figure of Soma was still central to the Khmer political cosmos. The connection between the king and the serpent goddess was not just a myth of the past, but a vital, living act, a ritual that had to be performed nightly to ensure the survival and prosperity of the entire empire. Soma, Liu-yeh, the queen of Funan, emerged from the brief records of a Chinese envoy to become one of the foundational figures of an entire civilization. Her true power lies not in battles or buildings, but in her symbolic strength. She is the symbol of the land, of the indigenous roots. She is the symbol of female power in a world often dominated by men. And most importantly, she is the divine mother of an entire people. She did not just forge an empire through marriage. She forged an ideological legacy that has endured for thousands of years and is still carved on the stones of Angkor to this day.